Who's ever said, my lawyers don't get it? Or my lawyers reject everything I want to do, or they don't respect me, they don't listen to me, they don't let me do anything good, they shoot down all my ideas, they water down everything, they nitpick all the details and miss the big picture. Who's ever said that before? Who hasn't said that? Who hasn't said that? Who doesn't say that on a somewhat regular basis? And I think that that's, as marketers, that's generally been our experience. I was in-house as a marketer for 8 years before I went into consulting a long time ago. And so let me start with a little history. So this is Ross as a little marketer. I know. And I know, look at how naive, young and yeah, how naive I was back then. And so I come racing into the marketing partner's office with a great idea. And of course it was a great idea. This is a long time ago. The good ideas hadn't been used yet. And so there were lots of good ideas. There were good ideas everywhere, things law firms hadn't done yet because marketing was fairly new. And there were lots of good ideas that had yet to be accomplished. And so I'd have a good idea, and I'd race into the marketing partner's office, and I'd say, here's a great idea, we should do this. No one's ever done this before. Great opportunity. And he'd say, well, you know, here's why that won't work, and we really can't do that. And you know, over and over, with all these great ideas that I would have, and I would tell them to you, and you'd say, hey, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we should do that. And that would be about how long it would take. Give you a few facts, the general idea. You'd kind of do the math in your head, you'd run the numbers, you'd think about it, you'd think through some variations, and you'd say, yeah, that would work, that's a good idea. And I would do that same thing, and the lawyers would always shoot it down. Marketing committee meetings were just painful. We couldn't get anything done. Now, it wasn't that we didn't do good work, because we did. The lawyers would tell us to do something, and we would do a good job implementing that. And maybe we'd even improve upon that, and we would implement that very effectively. But our ideas, the more innovative ones, the more cutting-edge ideas, the more progressive ones that they hadn't asked us to do, I could never seem to get implemented. And so I'd come in and be like, this is what we should do. And my experience was like, I'm this guy. Day after day, year after year, doing my best, trying really hard, and having the same experience year after year, but trying, because marketers, we keep plugging away at it. So today what I'm going to try to do is, now this is 20 years later, and so now I've kind of figured out what works. I couldn't have kept doing that for 20 years, always having my ideas shot down. The reason that I showed you that stuff before I started presenting was those are just some of the hundreds of marketing campaigns that we've launched over the decades. The point is, there's a lot of different ideas, a lot of different kinds of firms and different initiatives that we've successfully accomplished, that we successfully launched with and through a wide range of firms, small, big firms all over the country, all different kinds of initiatives. And the point is, I've kind of figured out now what works with lawyers by some trial and error. But over time, I finally figured out kind of what it is that works and how I can get things done, how I can get creative, difficult things bought into by lawyers who don't have a lot of marketing experience. So I'm going to talk about how to sell ideas to lawyers. And this, I kind of work in the website, branding, visuals, ads and logos, that kind of space. But the same strategy works if you're trying to create a client service program at your firm. If you want to enact a client survey, if you would like to buy a new piece of technology or launch a new initiative, there's a way that lawyers approach things, and that once we understand how they approach things and how we should then structure our arguments, how we approach them with the ideas and sell those ideas to them, you should be significantly more effective if you're having that same experience that I did. And maybe you don't, but I certainly had a very difficult time, and now I don't. Now I win about 95% of the time, that I can approach almost any marketing committee on almost any subject, and with enough notice and preparation, I can get them to buy into just about anything because I know how they approach things. And I'm going to teach you today what I do. I know other people may do it differently, but this is what I have found works works for me. Whatever it is that you're selling, whether it's a new brand or a new training program, a new piece of technology, whatever it is that you're trying to get them to do. So I have this experience a lot. I've worked with hundreds of marketers, and very often they'll say, you know, I got to really, everybody starts this way. My law firm's really difficult. It's like, yeah, that's the definition. They're lawyers. They're always going to be difficult in certain ways. I have tried for 5 years to get them to do this. I say, okay, give me 20 minutes. And they're like, no, I've tried consistently for 5 years. They always say no. I said, all right, give me 20 minutes. I say, all right, go ahead. It's your funeral. And then 20 minutes later, they say, yeah, let's do that. It's like, what the hell did you do? How did you get them to say yes to something that I have gotten 5 years worth of no's to? I say, well, I did it differently. Because there's a way to approach these things. And so why does it work for me? Well, you're a consultant. They listen to consultants. Or you're a man. Or you're older. Or you're a lawyer. And yes, all of those things are, yes, they are true. I am all of those things. But more importantly, it's how I approach things. Those things do help. They absolutely do. And if you have those, let's call them advantages, then you have some benefit. But that's still, I was all of those things and still couldn't get things done until I changed my approach. And yes, being a consultant is a big part of it, but it's not the fact that I'm a consultant. Although, I will grant you, when I was in-house, I couldn't get things done either, and then we'd bring in a consultant, and it would seem to work when that person said it. And what I have more recently come to realize is, when you're a consultant, you approach things differently because you have to. That I can't afford to get 5 years worth of no's, or my kids don't eat and I can't pay my mortgage. And so it's more important for me to get a yes, because if we come in with a big new website and the lawyers say, yeah, no, forget it, then I don't get paid. And so I've got to make sure that I get a yes, which is very different than how I approach things when I was in-house. And so I have to work harder to make sure that I button up every contingency so that I always get a yes. And so I'm going to tell you how I do that. There's a formula that I use, and I'm going to tell you what that is. So let's say you want to improve your website. Okay, so here's your website. This is the website most firms have. What does it say? Our firm is big and old. We offer the skills of a large firm and a nicer, more collegial environment of a smaller firm. We work as a team. We're service-oriented. We're efficient. We're green. We're diverse. We represent absolutely everybody, anybody, from family businesses to Fortune 500 companies in every possible practice area, from ADR to zoning, and we're the best firm at every single one of those areas, which we further prove with a picture of a column, or a gavel, or a handshake, or a skyline, or if you're in multiple cities, multiple skylines, rotating skylines, or maps, or globes, or books, and our books are striped. This may be 2017, but we still use books. Chessboards, because we think strategically. Light bulbs, because we have good ideas. Taglines like, when success matters, when results matter, we're committed to clients. The big sort of generic platitudes that apply to every business, every company, and every industry. Other cliches.
You forgot the scales of justice. That's the cliche.
Yes, that is absolutely another one. As well as super lawyers, leading lawyers, best lawyers, AV, premier, pictures of our building, or if we're embarrassed of our building, pictures of somebody else's building. Empty lobbies, empty jury boxes, empty conference room chairs. If you've got a healthcare practice, then every industry group has its own. Every healthcare practice shows stethoscopes. Every energy practice has wind turbines and solar panels. Pictures of your lawyers, just pictures of your lawyers. Here's Joe in Los Angeles in litigation. Here's Sally in Palo Alto in real estate, or whatever. Or group shots of lawyers. We've got the action shots, lawyers walking. We've got the diversity messages, crayons, colored pencils, flags, or just a diverse conference room of people, one of everything. And no one has this much diversity, so they just spend 20 bucks on iStock and then buy models of diversity, sort of pretending that those are their lawyers. We've got the mentoring photo, which always looks like sexual harassment to me, especially these days. And then we've got pictures of documents, hands signing documents, pens, eyeglasses, resting on documents, right? So when I'm trying to sell a new website, new brand and website to a firm, so I'll go through this material with them, and then we'll go through their competitors, kind of show them what's out there, because the lawyers never really pay attention to the marketplace. It's really not their job to do that. That's our job as the marketers, to see what's going on. They don't go trolling around other law firms in their communities' websites. That's just not what they do. They're too busy trying to stay current on their own practices. So let's look at some local websites. So here's one, Skyline. So this is part of a presentation that I was doing to a law firm. Skyline. These are their competitors. Skyline. Chess pieces. Skyline with chairs. More skylines with the conference room. Books with people. I don't know what this is. Blurry people walking, building. White guys in suits with a giant. Tough and how. Sophisticated and how. Map. Columns. Okay. And then this is their website, the one that we're trying to improve. Okay? So which website stood out? Any websites, the ones we showed you, any of them stand out in your mind? Any one of them more memorable or different?
The tough-looking people.
The tough-looking people? Yeah?
The original one with the trees. Nobody else had trees.
Oh, sure. Generally, the tough-looking people. So here's my first rule. I used to come out of these marketing meetings when I was a marketing director and think, God, how stupid do you have to be not to understand that that's a good idea? How do they not get this? It's so obvious. And then after years of this, I realized they're not stupid. I'm the stupid one. I am failing to teach them what they need to know. They're not stupid. They just haven't had the class. And it's my job to give them that class. I can't expect them to make a good decision until they have the information necessary to do that, which I consistently failed to provide them. And then I would ask them to make a decision based on information that I just thought was so obvious, that I just took for granted, that everybody's got to know this. And then it turned out, because I'm a lawyer, they must know this. And I realized, no, actually I'm not. I may have a law degree, but fundamentally, I'm a marketer. I approach the world differently. I look at things through a marketer's eye, and I pay attention to marketing materials, and we go to LMA meetings, and we spend so much time in marketing that it was hard for me to understand what the world looks like from a lawyer's perspective. That my rule is, if we're right, if whatever it is that we're suggesting, whatever program we're recommending, whatever technology we want to buy or implement, whatever brand or website or logo or campaign of some sort that we would like to implement, if we're right, if you and I, the marketers and the consultants, if we are correct that the thing that we're recommending is the right idea for the firm, and they understand marketing well enough, they should see that we're right and agree. And if they disagree, then either they don't understand, either we're wrong, or they just don't understand marketing well enough. So let's presume that we're right, then it's our job to make sure that they have the education that they need to be able to be in a position to see that. And that's my job, that's our job, but fundamentally that's my job. But we have to educate them on those subjects to position them to make a good decision. And once I realized that it wasn't that they were stupid, it's that they just didn't understand what I needed them to know about marketing, because I've been living in that world for so long, it just didn't occur to me that they didn't have the same level of knowledge, that it's just not intuitive to them. Things that you would take for granted because, first of all, you've got a marketer's brain. We look at the world differently. Plus, we pay so much more attention to this than they do. We've got to get them on board with us. Okay? So looking at marketers versus lawyers, this is how I look at it. So for the older folks, this is Star Trek, okay? Captain Kirk was a marketer, and Mr. Spock was a lawyer, okay? Captain Kirk, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Mr. Spock, insufficient facts always invite danger. That's my experience in every marketing committee ever. That's how we approach every conversation with a lawyer. This is how we perceive the world. Or for those of you who are younger, lawyer, 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 marketer. Right? They're physicists. She's a normal person. She's a marketer. She's different. Or for those of you who been immersed in the marketer versus or lawyer versus non-lawyer issue, this is physicist, physicist, non-physicist. But the point is, when she's living in the physicist world, she's at a significant disadvantage. She is not the expert in that. You're not an expert in law, but you're an expert in marketing. And so when living in her world, they may be really smart at the narrow thing that they're great at, but they're not great at what she does. She's an expert in her world. And when we are in a marketing committee, they should be living in our world. We're the experts. We've just got to help teach them what we need them to know within a physicist's brain or a Mr. Spock's brain. Because lawyers, that's how they perceive the world. And so we've got to take a step back and say, okay, I got to look at this like a lawyer. Okay, so here's a new idea. I give you a new idea. Hey, we should do this thing. I'll give you a few facts, general perspective, and you think, okay, you got your basic market knowledge, you know your firm very well, you know the marketplace very well. You think, okay, that's a good idea, let me think about that. Think some things through, work this through in your head a little bit, kind of get the big picture in mind, evaluate the market, what you know about it. And, hey, you know, that's a good idea. Yeah, Ross, that's a good idea, we should do that. Lawyers, you know, and now we'll also think, okay, now there's some things I might tweak about that. You know, I think that generally we're heading in the right direction. It's not perfect, but it's close. You know, we're heading in the same general direction, but we can tweak it along the way because we know there'll be some matter of degree, but that's okay. We're comfortable. We'll fix that along the way. Lawyers, same information. They'll say, wait a second. We can't do that. It's not perfect yet. We don't have enough facts to decide. This is the one that really got me, was that they need every detail. They need every fact handled, every possible contingency addressed, that they never feel like they have enough information to make a decision. And so, if that's how they perceive the world, that they're always looking for the gap, for the hole, for the mistake, for the possible problem, they know they don't have enough information because there's a gap right here that you haven't addressed. The fact that you're willing to make a decision anyway makes them look at you like, how do you possibly think you can make a decision? You don't have enough data. And we never have enough data for them, or we rarely have enough data for them because they're always looking for the holes. So unless we are similarly looking for all of the holes and then filling every single one of those to their comfort level, they'll never agree. Because they'll look at us like, how are this is just some half-cocked idea because you don't have all the details managed. And look at all the gaps, look at all the holes. And another thing is that they're very insecure and brittle in a lot of these areas where they're concerned about being laughed at. And so some big advertising campaign, something public that your firm is launching, they're scared without even realizing it necessarily. They'd certainly never say this, but they're scared that their old college buddy is going to call them up and say, hey, I saw that thing your firm did. Nice. That's enough to kill an entire $1 million advertising campaign. I have seen this happen. Major law firms have launched multi-million-dollar ad campaigns that I thought, wow, that was really good. I love that. That is going to work great. And it starts working great. And then some high school buddy goes, hey, saw that thing. Jeez, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And they're just like the way guys blow each other crap. He didn't really mean it. He was just giving him the business. And then that lawyer, who of course is on some senior level marketing committee, management committee, something, freaks out, panics, feels embarrassed, calls up the CMO or the managing partner and says, pull that stupid thing now. And then it happens. That a thing that could have worked great is suddenly dead. It's like, what the heck happened? Well, what happened was he got a call from a golfing buddy who'd seen that in the paper or wherever and embarrassed him, and that was it. That's all the evidence that a lawyer needed was, I feel bad, that's stupid, it's dead. And many firms, most firms, one really pissed off lawyer is enough to kill almost anything. And so we can't afford to take that risk. We have very different communication styles. Lawyers are intellectual, analytical, skeptical, and highly risk-averse, very defensive, very insecure deep down. Where marketers, we're much more open, much more willing to take measured, calculated risks. We like new ideas. We're not scared of them. We don't intend to pick them apart. We want them to be right. We're not reckless, but we're more willing to try new things. But remember, in order for us to do that, we've got to get past people who are risk-averse. We like to try new things. Where lawyers like to analyze that. They like to find the problems, find the mistakes, find the holes and the gaps, find what could possibly go wrong. That's one thing. That's not a criticism. That makes them good lawyers. You don't want a lawyer who can't do that. They would write a terrible contract if they haven't figured out every possible thing that could go wrong and fixed it. So that's why contracts can be so long, because they've got to figure out every possible contingency and make sure that there's a protection against that, because they've seen what can happen if that goes wrong. Then you got litigation just for having missed that little thing. And so my old boss when I was in house, the marketing partner, he said to me once, he was a lawyer first, and he said to me once that like the best day practicing law for him was he was looking through a 100-page contract and found the missing comma. That was like nirvana. That was as good as it got for him. And I'm thinking, oh my God, are we different people? I mean, I would do that. When I was a lawyer, you can't afford to miss a comma. And I would do that, and I would be very careful, and I would have done that, as you would have as well. But you wouldn't look forward to that. That wouldn't be your best day. That would be a tiresome day. That got him so excited to look through that 100-page contract just in case there was a missing comma, and he found one. That's your audience. And so we've got to take that in mind when we're trying to persuade them to do whatever it is that we want. Their opinion is always, here's why that won't work, because that's a very safe approach. That won't work. Let's not do that. No one ever got fired for not doing something risky. But we still have to convince them that it's not. So we did a communications program at this firm that I was with, kind of a Myers-Briggs thing. And we broke it down by thinkers, deciders, and feelers. And the thinkers were like the Mr. Spocks, deciders, and feelers. Of the 25 people of this big firm, 23 were big firm lawyers, were all Mr. Spock. The two people who were the thinkers, the deciders, were the two marketers in the room, and no one was a feeler. So they said, answer three questions, you got 30 minutes, very basic questions. The thinkers had 30 minutes to answer three simple questions. They didn't actually answer any of them. They just analyzed for a while and then finished without answering a question. The deciders, we thought about it, we answered all three questions, and took a 15-minute break. It wasn't hard for us we didn't have to weigh every variable, and yes, it's true, but on the other hand, that couldn't be, and then they just analysis paralysis. They couldn't agree to anything. And then one of them left, then when they left, and one guy in the executive committee said, now I see why the executive committee can't make a decision. It wasn't even important to them. They didn't feel bad about failing to answer the questions. It just wasn't important to them. Answering the questions just wasn't, as important as the analysis was. And so they failed the assignment, but we're happy with the analysis. We've got to get them to make a decision. So how do you pitch to lawyers? Okay, is that all? Y'all with me so far? Does this seem like your lives? You want to kill yourselves now, or do you want to? Okay, so here's the thing. So the first thing we need to do is identify what are the possible concerns that they might have. And I mean every single one of them. Here's what I want to do. Here's where we are now. What are all the possible objections that they could have, regardless how ridiculous it might sound? Identify every single one of them and get help doing it, because you won't be able to figure out all of them, the craziest ones. You should get help. Find a lawyer and say, look, poke holes in this. Lawyers would love doing that anyway. Find a marketing friend. What are the possible things that could go wrong? What are the possible objections? Again, regardless of how remote. I want them to be personal, professional, emotional, marketplace, whatever they are. Find every possible thing that anyone could say against that answer, no matter how ridiculous. Identify them and list them all, because you are going to need to address every single one of those points. Because someone in that room, you get a room full of lawyers, a marketing committee, and you get enough people who are not comfortable with this, they're fine with where they are now, and you want them to do something that's pretty good, different, innovative, they're going to come up with all the different objections in that room. And as soon as one lawyer comes up with an objection, then it becomes a feeding frenzy. It's like, hey, yeah, I got a question too. Yeah, I don't like this. And they don't mean to be negative. It's just how they think, and they enjoy their conducting that analysis again, right? And so you've got to then identify every single one and have a logical, reasonable, and winning argument for every single one of those points. If you don't, you're going to lose. I win about 95% of the time now. The reason that I showed you all those creative things that we've done for hundreds of other firms is because they all started very conservative. They all started like, my firm's really difficult. Our lawyers are really tough. They say no to everything. It's like, I know. Every law firm does. Out of 200 times we've done this, maybe 5 times have they said, we've got a really creative firm, we want to really push the envelope. Those are great, but those are the exception. That lawyers generally start very conservative and risk averse, and to get them to do something really bold and creative, you've got to live in their world, and you've got to teach them to that point. Here's the answer. I need to teach them to that answer. So, not only do I need to know what the objections are, I need to know in what order they're likely to come up with those objections so that I can head those off. Because I know generally, if I think this through, right around here, they're going to start wondering about this. Or they're going to start wondering about conflicts about here. And because I'm talking about these things, then I start to hear that's going to make somebody in the room think, ooh, what about conflicts? So before we get to that point where they're worrying about that, just before that point, I've got to answer. Now, some of you are probably thinking about conflicts, and here's what. And so I control the room. I control the agenda. I control the flow of the conversation. I control the PowerPoint slides, and I control the evidence that I'm providing in the order that I'm providing it. So as long as I can anticipate where they're going to object and what they're going to be thinking, then I have to provide evidence to deflect them off of that before it even comes into their head and I start an argument, because I don't want an argument. I want a monologue where they at the end say yes, as opposed to, I don't want a debate, I don't want a discussion. You get a bunch of lawyers debating and I've lost. Because then you know the tangents that they can go off on. You can't let that happen. You've got to control the conversation. And you don't do that by doing what I used to do, which was, hey, here's something we should do, and here's why. By the time you tell them what you want to do, they're picking you apart already. And that was a problem that I had when I was in-house, is I gave them the chance to think of all the problems and then pile on. And at that point, I'm dead, because now I'm constantly defending myself against their onslaught. That was my mistake. I gave them the chance to do that. I created the fight that I was invariably going to lose. Now what I do is I teach them what I want them to do. We're going to have a conversation about logos. But I don't tell them anything about it until I've taught them what I need them to know. Then I show them that. I'll get to that later. But I've got to understand the flow of their logic, of the points that I need to make, and make sure that I answer all of those points with bullet points, data, examples, firms they know, firms they respect. If there's nothing in our industry, then somebody else's. But every single possible objection. And remember, the people you're talking to are successful under what you have now. Love Machiavelli. The innovator has for enemies all who have done well under the old law. You want to change the compensation system at a firm? It's the same strategy. But just understand that you're talking to people who got rich and famous and popular and powerful under the current system. So how are you going to persuade them to change what has made them very rich and powerful? It's hard. It's possible. But you don't start by saying, we need to change our compensation system. They will say no, and you're fired, and that was a very short meeting. But you got to teach them. Let's discuss. We're going to have a meeting about compensation generally, and then you can work your way there, or whatever it is. They're very comfortable with where you are now. So many years ago, we launched the world's first law firm service guarantee. Okay, we were going to guarantee in writing our client's satisfaction. Okay? No one had ever done that before. What are some of the objections? If you're me and I need to sell this idea to the law firm, what are some of the objections that I'm going to have to overcome? What do you think? What might they be thinking when I say, we're going to guarantee our clients, our lawyers' service? What do you think?
Terrible client service.
That we already provide terrible client service? Yeah. We're not perfect yet.
We'll lose money.
We'll lose money. What happens when somebody says, you know, you've represented me for 10 years, $10 million with legal fees. I've had this lingering sense of dissatisfaction. I want all my money back. Yeah, that's a legitimate risk or concern. What else?
Malpractice?
Malpractice, absolutely. You can't guarantee things. It's against, we could get disbarred. Yeah. It's unethical. It could look desperate. Why would we do this if we didn't have to? It's too gimmicky. Domino's Pizza guarantees service, not law firms. It's too risky. They may demand their money back. Let's get perfect first and then launch it. We're not perfect yet. What about this guy, Joe? He's terrible. His service stinks. You know, and these are, we went through all of these. I had to address all of these and a whole bunch of other ones. And it took me a 4-hour meeting. I called a 4-hour half-day off-site with the marketing committee because I had to teach them a whole lot more than this. And about 2 hours into it, it's like I had them, you know, they were right on board. They liked where we were going. And by that point, they were like, hey, I can see where this, and so I actually didn't have to get to the end of it because once they understood it, the background, the context, then they jumped ahead. But not until they understood what and why, and a lot of other examples, you know, similarly. So what works? How do you persuade a law firm to be first at something? The old joke was convince them that everybody else is already doing that. There are 3 ways, I think, to sell strategies, to sell to lawyers. There's the push strategy. You're going to talk them into it. You're going to force them to do it. And you can do that with very small things. You know, where you can just beat them down and they're like, all right, there's no risk, whatever, let's try it. But that's only for very little things. There's the, I don't care for it, the convince them everyone else is already doing that strategy, but frankly, if that's not true, I just don't care for the ethics of that. It's lying to them to get them to do the right thing. And frankly, I think what works and what I advocate is just educating them. Help them understand it well enough to see that it is, in fact, a good idea. Then they'll get on board. Then it's their idea. And that's more sustainable over time because they really understand it deeply. And so they believe in it. And that's pulling them along. That's the education. It's all about education. Okay, so what's the formula? Create the need. Identify the problem that you want to solve, whatever this is for you. And then determine all the obstacles, the personal obstacles, the embarrassment, what are the professional issues, the emotional ones, the economic ones, the marketplace. What are all the possible problems? And then be prepared to address every single one of them to diffuse their legitimate concerns and personal anxieties. These are smart people. They will come up with really good concerns. And we want to value those things. We want to acknowledge that those are legitimate, but just understand that, help them see that we also have taken those into consideration. And that here's why we think that in light of all of those concerns that you have, here's why we still think that's a good idea. And then build that case step by step by step. My presentations in these situations can be easily 100 slides because I've got to have a lot of little points, and I've broken them down a lot of different ways, a lot of different points, and then I need support for all of them. And I'll show you in a minute. Build your case. So the detailed PowerPoint, because they're also, many of the people will be very visual, and it's much easier for them to see it than to think about it in their head, because you can't control that nearly as much. And show a lot of examples, because lawyers find those to be persuasive. If there's no legal examples, find accounting. Find something else that they would believe to be relatively analogous. And then rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. You've got to be, and even those of you who are not comfortable public speakers, you've got to know, you know your material. You may not be as comfortable speaking to a marketing committee meeting, and particularly in light of your historic experience, maybe that's certainly legitimate. But the better you know the material, the more confident you're going to be. The better your argument, the more comfortable you'll be presenting it. Call that special purpose meeting. This is your meeting. This is your hour, and they're going to sit there and they're going to pay attention. And as long as you have done your work appropriately, they will find it very interesting. Lawyers love learning. They just love learning in their way. And so we will have presented it in a way that makes sense to them. You're the marketing experts. We're living in your world during this hour. You control the meeting. You control the flow of the argument. Now also, bookend the meeting with supporters. So when we launch a branding campaign, okay? So I'm going to be speaking to 100, 50, 500 people in a room who have never been part of this process. They have no marketing experience. They have not been part of the branding thing, and we're going to be launching something very innovative. Okay, let's just say that that's the context. The way that I do it, always, and I think that you should too, even if it's a small group, even if it's just 5 people in the meeting. You never want to walk in, just like a lawyer walking into court. You never ask a witness a question that you don't know the answer to, because they could totally screw you. And so you want to get your votes in line before you get there. And so beforehand, before I pitch something to even a small group, I'm going to talk to my favorite person on the committee who's influential, and I say, look, they've previewed it with them. And they say, okay, look, I want you to talk this up. Your script on the front end is, look, I'm really excited to have Ross show you this. I've gotten a preview of this. I think it's terrific. I think it's really great. I'm really excited about this, and I'm really excited to have him show this to you. Okay? Because that sets them up to like it. And the more influential that person is, that's the managing partner ideally, or marketing partner. I want somebody really influential on the front end, setting the stage so that they'll like it. They're in a mood to be excited about it, as opposed to another stupid marketing thing. All right, because some of them will be approaching it that way. They hate marketing. So I want them to be ready to like it. Then I go through all the steps. Then, and this is important, then I'll say something like, so, what do y'all think? And the other person that I've previewed this with, this is his or her script. As soon as I finish, they have to immediately be the first voice. And they've got to say, wow, you know me, I generally hate this stuff, but I think that's terrific. I am really excited about that. Because we need the conversation on the back end to be very brief, because I don't want a big detailed conversation. I want a yes, and then let's get the hell out of the room. Start drinking. Start doing something. But I don't want a debate, because that's the worst thing that you can have at that point. I want somebody to say, particularly somebody who's known to be critical, not a yes man or a happy person on marketing. You want somebody from the outside, a crabby gadfly, saying, I think that's great. And then we leave. Because what can happen is on the back end, everybody likes it. I've had this happen, where we had that all set up and somehow the crabby secretary, who everybody thinks is a nut, said, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And the whole room went, they were feeling really good, and then a second later just popped the balloon. And it was just a secretary that everybody hated, and it still deflated things. And so what we wanted to make sure, we still got it done, it's just people lost some of the excitement. And so you want a voice to then bookend that with, this is going to be great, I teach them that it is, and then somebody else says, that was great. Now we've got this all neatly packaged. And I don't care what this is for you. I live in the branding and website world. That's my this. But whatever yours is, buy a new piece of technology or something. It's still the same flow. Remember, you're the expert. You control the agenda. You know more about marketing. You've got more examples and experience in your head than they would ever have. This hour that you're getting from me, most of them won't spend an hour a year. We go to LMA meetings. We read marketing things all the time. You're truly the experts, but we've got to help them see that. Teach them to the answer that you want. You've got to have a process. Even if you don't need a process, because the answer is so obvious, they still don't believe in, hey, I'm the expert, do what I say. It's just not who they are. They don't act that way. No, in hundreds of firms, not one person has ever said, well, I completely disagree with you, but you're the expert, we'll do it your way. That's just not in their dialogue. It's not something they would ever say. They're willing to trust me or you they'll give you the time to make your case, but they won't trust you until they believe it just as deeply. And so I want this, I'm starting here, I want all the arguments that I've made to make this the inevitable, inviolable conclusion. This is the only right answer. Because I have fed them all the data that gets them there. If I'd started with that first, they would have said, hell no. Because from their perspective, that would have been the right answer. Based on the level of knowledge they had at that time, hell no would have been a very reasonable answer. And so to get them over here, I've got to help them. I've got to walk them there baby step by baby step, bullet point by bullet point, slide by slide. I got to prove that it works. I've got to make fun of the bad things that we got to get out of their way. We have to contrast bad work to good work, so that they can so they can learn what's good and then for themselves decide what's good. We've got to make that okay. We can't tell them that this is bad and this is good. They'll say, no, you're wrong, it's the other way, until they know. And lots of good examples can do that. But you got to be careful, because they also have very short attention spans. Lawyers are smart, they learn very quickly, and they have a very short they have a very short attention span for repetition. They get frustrated very quickly with, yeah, I've seen that already, move on. Yeah, you said that already, next. We get that all the time, right? And so that means I've just done a bad job with my argument. That's why you have to rehearse. After this morning's presentation, I said to people, so, I've never done this presentation before. I repeated some things here or there. Was that effective or was that annoying? Because I want to know, in front of a live audience, where does it work, where doesn't it work? I want feedback. Okay? So we got to prove that it works. Reduce the risk of failure. Reduce their risk. Contrast a limited downside to a significant upside. Okay? Now, what did I do earlier? Heather was thinking, yeah, I've seen those slides before, Ross. Right? Who's seen me present before? Two of you. Okay. Yeah, Vicki somewhere. You've seen that before, and there's a reason that, so what did I do? Let's look at what I did when I was talking about the websites and all those slides. My goal, when I do that material, is to get lawyers, when I pitch a new website or brand, my goal is to convince them not to use skylines and columns and handshakes and all those other things that they think are the right answer. Hey, how are they going to know that we're a law firm unless we show them a gavel or scales of justice or skylines or courtrooms? Those make perfect sense, and they do. From their perspective, legal icons, law-related iconography, makes sense. Everybody else is doing it. It seems to be a good answer. But I don't want them to do that. I want them to do this. So I first have to set that up and then knock it down without them feeling bad about themselves, without them feeling stupid. And I don't want to tell them that they're wrong. I want them to come to those conclusions themselves. I can take a room full of 100 lawyers, and going through that kind of process, I can take people who have thought for 20 years skylines are the right answer. They're the only answer. And in 10 minutes, I can get them to avoid all of those cliches. Here's what I did. So I started out with, hey, we're big and old, we do everything for everyone, and we're all laughing about those things, and they're thinking, yep, that's us. Yep, that's us. Yep, yep. And they're laughing about that, and they'd never thought about that before. Oh yeah, I guess everybody else does say that. And then I showed them all the cliches. They're all laughing about skylines and blurry lawyers walking in silhouettes in front of windows and the diverse conference room. And whatever it is that they have at their firm, I make sure that I highlight the things that they have on their website because I want them to change that. So I've got to get them to laugh about all the things that they're doing now without feeling bad or stupid. Because somebody in the room came up with that. So I'm goring the heck out of somebody else's ox in front of everybody, and everybody knows who the marketing committee is. And I'm going to make fun of what they did, but I've got to do it in a way that helps them get past that without feeling bad. And so we're all going to laugh about this together. And so we talk about all the icons. No lawyer has ever sat through that and then said, you know what we need? Skylines. They will walk back thinking, we need a new website, or we need a new brand, or we need something, because now they have context for it, which they didn't before. And then I showed them all their competitors. Not all of them, some of them are really good. I didn't show them all the good ones. I showed them all the cliches. So I showed them all these local firms that are all making those same mistakes. Just sharing it, as my old boss used to say, share your problems with the Western world. Because then it's okay. Now everybody's making those same mistakes. And then I asked, which one stands out? And I think y'all knew that the tough and how, that was very different than the other ones. And the ones that I pick is something that is very analogous to what I will want them to be doing later. Because now they've said that one stands out. They like that one more. Which one do you remember? That one. Yeah. Okay. Why? And then we can talk about that. Then I show them theirs, which is always a skyline or something. And so I think, so what do you think about yours? Oh, yeah, we should really change it. Yeah, you should. But now it's their idea to do it. That was this. But I fed them all the data that they needed to walk them there. I did that with you, and you didn't know that that's what I was doing, but that's how I structure my argument to get them to that point. It takes a lot longer to do this, but that's why it works. Once I know what the conclusion is, the brand, that's in our case, the logo, the website, the design, the technology, whatever it is for you. Once you know what this is, then you know what you need to feed them step by step to get them there. Okay? I didn't say we need a new website, because then they would say, no, we don't. This one's fine. No one's ever going to hire us because of our website. And then you got an argument about whether you need a new website or not. I don't want that. Let's just talk about websites. So we talk about websites. I didn't say we need a bold new brand. No, branding is stupid. It's too expensive. You can't brand a law firm. We don't need it. What we have is fine. And so on. Now you got to fight. You start with that, and you got to fight. I don't want to fight. Now we can't use skylines and columns. Sure we can. Everybody does. We're in New Orleans. Let's have a picture of New Orleans. Now you got to fight about whether that works or not. I'm picking fights here by voicing a conclusion. Now they can argue with conclusion. Every single lawyer can do that. So I don't want to give them the opportunity to do that. Okay? Changing a firm's logo. Our goal, here's another example. So our goal is to change this logo to that one. Okay? It's a marketing project we worked on a number of years ago. So that's the goal. What are the objections that I'm going to get?
We can
Peck, Rankin, and Hubbard.
Though the first 4 objections are the guys whose names are getting shortened. Absolutely. Jeez, have you ever done this before?
Oh, never.
Been around the block? Yeah. First of all, those guys are going to say, no. What else? Those are absolutely, and each one of those, that's absolutely right. What else?
I hate blue.
I hate
Too
blue.
bold.
It's what?
Too bold. I don't know.
It's too common, or it's too bold, depending on the shade of blue, for God's sakes. Right.
How are they going to know we're not a law corporation if we don't write a law corporation?
Exactly. Yep, absolutely. So what are the obstacles that we have when we're doing these presentations?
Risk-averse.
Well, first of all, we got a typo.
Yeah.
There are no typos. When you're doing these presentations, if you give a lawyer a typo, you may as well just leave the room. Because they will obsess over that. If you miss a comma, you're dead. Lawyers don't do rough drafts, and now, they're perfectly comfortable with their own typos. But your typos, God help you. Right? And in these, where everything's even bigger, you will kill your credibility. If you can't do that right, then how the hell can I trust you to do anything else? Which makes no sense at all, but it's how they think. Okay? So we're going to change this to that. The objections were things like Lugenbuehl. No one knows how to say Lugenbuehl or pronounce Lugenbuehl or spell Lugenbuehl. Or I don't like Lugenbuehl. He was a jerk. I didn't like him. Or I have more business than, this is Heather's point, I have more business than he does. Shorten his name. I want mine bigger. I practice a different kind of law than he does. They're going to think that we do that kind of law, not my kind of law. My clients like having my name on the door. They said they'll fire me if my name isn't on the door. I swear, I've heard all of these. What they mean is over my dead body, but they don't want to sound like, they're that petty. So they say, well, my clients don't want that. I've got more business than he does. I'm not going to have my name reduced. I work too hard to have my name on my business card, on the letterhead, on the door, in the elevator lobby. It'll embarrass me in front of my wife if my name is suddenly smaller. These are all the things that they either say or are thinking. I'm petty, insecure, childish, and not a team player. Well, that's really Heather's point, but it's absolutely understandable. I wouldn't want my name reduced. I wouldn't. Who would? But it's still the right answer. And so how do we then get something so that seems like, we're just going to change the logo. God, no, that is one of the most difficult things. Poor Vicky's like banging her head against on the table.
Yeah.
I've done this 50 times. It works every single time. As long as you follow the formula. Because you've got to know that that's exactly what they're thinking. And a whole bunch of other things too. If we'd walked in and said, Mr. Hubbard, the name number 4, hey, we need a new logo. We're going to shorten everything to Lugenbuehl. You would have gotten your head handed you and then been shown the door. Because no, we're not. No, that's not what we're going to do. We're keeping it as it is. Okay? So we first have to make that okay. So how then do I sell that? That's this. What are then the steps to get you there? Well, I first got to recognize the emotion. Recognize what their concerns are going to be. In this case, a lot of them are personal and emotional. That we've got to make it okay to do this without it diminishing them as people and professionals. We've got to show that, everybody's doing it. It's not about the people. It's not about you. It's the company name. It's just a brand. It's just some stupid logo thing. We've got to make it seem like not a big deal so they don't feel bad and get all defensive. It's just math. It's just counting the number of syllables. It's just a logo. No one thinks that means that he's better than anybody else. We got through that issue 20 years ago. Law firms have been doing this for a long time. And then we got to talk about law firm names. We got to make shortening okay. So we go into, this kind of issue. Well, we call him Harley's, not Harley Davidson. It's not that Mr. Davidson was any different or, not as important as Mr. Harley. It's just his name is second. And Harley is a strong enough name, so we stop there. That's just how we do it with companies of all different types. So we've changed Harley Davidson into Harley. Now there are rules to this. And we never really think about what the rules are, but here's what the rules are. First of all, there's a national trend toward doing this in law firms. They got to making it okay. And there's policy that we all follow. There are rules. If the first name, the first word is strong enough to stand alone, it's unique enough, it's strong enough, then that's where people stop. We're not making this up. This is what the marketplace has already decided on our behalf. Skadden, Kirkland, Fulbright, Cravath, Cadwallader, Wachtell. These are bold, strong, unique names. It's not like, which Skadden do you mean? We all know. And so it's Skadden, Arp, Slate, Meager, and Flom, I always say. And Flom, in fact, was the most important lawyer. He was the managing partner for 40 years. He was the architect for creating Skadden. But he also recognized that people weren't using his name when they're referring to the firm, because Skadden was first and strong enough, and that's just where people stopped. Without really any regard to the others as individuals, as people. They were just words, syllables. Now you can't do it if you're Jones Day, because Jones isn't strong enough. Jones needs Day. There's so many Bakers. Baker Hostetler, Baker McKenzie, Baker Robbins, Baker Bond. Just too many Bakers. So you can't stop at Baker. But we can with Lugenbuehl, just because it's a strong word and there aren't any other Lugenbuehls. So I'm making it okay. I'm not making it about the relative merit of the lawyers as much as the syllables that we're counting in the words. And what the marketplace has already decided. They already call us Lugenbuehl. He works at the Lugenbuehl firm. And Lugenbuehl's dead, which frankly makes it a lot easier. But they know, deep down they know, that that's how people are abbreviated. So then let's look at your competitors. Here's some of your local competitors, and here's your name. I'm making it hard for them to complain, to object, because it looks ridiculous, doesn't it? Visually, it just looks like they're the aberration. I'm trying to make this about math and objectivity. So here's a bunch of logos from the local firms, of offices, our competitors. Which ones stand out? See theirs here? They're like, yeah, it's not us. You can't argue with the math here, okay? It's all the same basic size and shape. What stands out? And they realize, yeah, boy, ours really doesn't really work now. More bullet points. And then there's a rule, the marketing rule. If your firm has more than 2 names, highlight wherever people naturally stop. I made that up. But it sounds like a rule, doesn't it? Now let's compare. At the same width. One stands out and one doesn't. I'm making it hard for them to object. Okay, more points to support the obvious answer that I want. So now let's look. You can't argue with the conclusion at this point. I've made it okay. Everybody does it. I've taken the emotion out of the argument. And now comparison, no one could say, no, the other one works better. You can't. It doesn't. Now let's try it in practice. So you can see the difference. They can't, it's not about them. Now here's a difference. I didn't have a before on that one, but here's a before and after. You can see how it works, that they'd be proud to pull that out as a business card. It works for them. Now some other issues. Again, just logo issues. Here's a one we did that was a purple logo at a firm that used to use brown. Well, now I've got to teach them about color. I got to make color okay. I got to make not navy blue okay. And so then I got to show them a lot of different firms that use a lot of different colors. Then I got to make purple okay. Denton's and others that have used purple in their logo. Color is another point. And just to get to color, that's another 10 slides. I've got to teach them about color. I got to teach them about layout. I got to teach them about what stands out. Now if you've got one of those giant initials, the giant initial ones mean these lawyers didn't want to prioritize, were not willing to prioritize anybody over anybody else. So they went with these giant initials. Instead of focusing on the name that everybody calls them, they have these huge distracting initials. And I wanted to change it to that. So I got to get them out. Now let's talk about initials. And we got to have a whole 10-slide debate about initials, before and after, and so on. So we got to teach them to every single point. So create the need, lay out the case, remove the risk, all the bullet points, visuals. If they can see the examples, it works better than me telling them about them. They're never going to take your word for it. I don't care how good you are, how experienced, how old, how many years you've been doing this, how many awards you've won. They're just not going to. They believe their gut. more than anything else you could ever show them. We've got to change their gut for them to get on board.
Russ, one thing I would add to what you're saying is I changed the logo of my firm. I presented it to the executive committee, and I recognize they're risk-averse, and I recognize they're driven by precedent. But it's such a massive change. The other thing you have to allow for is time for them to absorb it, because it's change. So I struck out, they were all freaked out, and the chairman said, come back in 3 months and do it again. And I did. And then they had time, it wasn't such a shock to them. So I was ready to throw in the towel. And he said, no, come back. This time I laid out some ideas, and then they're starting to pick the logo they like, which means they've already crossed the threshold of accepting the idea.
And if you show them a bunch of, here's another thing I learned. If you show them 4 good choices, here are our top 4 choices. You will split the room into quarters, and you've created a fight for yourself. I don't want to show them good options, because then 25% of the room will pick their favorites, and now by the time we get to a final decision, 3/4 of the room didn't get their first choice. Now they don't like, if we taught them to the one that we agree is the marketers, this is the right one, let's show them that one and teach them why that's the good one. Because otherwise we end up picking a fight we didn't need to pick. That apparently wasn't your experience, but it's been mine. I don't show them lots of different choices anymore. I want to pick the one that's right and then make sure that they agree. Or we're looking for a fight we didn't need. Other issues. Well, it's going to be expensive. We got to change all our signage. We got to buy new business cards. We've got to do, how are we going to make the changeover? There's a lot of other issues I didn't address here. The point is, we've got to figure out what all of those possible objections are and answer all of them. Okay? So does that make sense?
Yes.
Does this double your effectiveness?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Great, thank you. I appreciate it. I have tried to give this presentation for 10 years to LMA, and they always said no. I think this is what I think is the most important thing that I've learned in 20 years of marketing is to do this. It takes a lot longer to do it this way. It takes a lot longer. But this, whatever this is for you, is really that important, then make sure that you win. I always win now. I may spend 50 hours generating that presentation. And the reason that I didn't do that when I was in-house was because who has that much time? But I would literally have to do that every single time in order to make sure that I won. Because I'm doing this for their benefit. And if we do something really powerful and then can't get them to agree, we've squandered a really valuable opportunity. So I really believe in this. If you have any questions, if you want to do this thing and you've run through your objections and questions and so on with your friends, and you want to run it by one more person who's a skeptical jerk and can poke holes in things, call me. I'm good at poking holes in things because I have had them all poked at me. All the things that I never would have come up with, they have, and I've learned from those by having, been burned so many times over the years. So thank you very much. So feel free to use me as a resource as well.